We're ready to get started. Again, we want to thank you for attending today's webinar, The Hybrid House, Reinventing Residential Power. Before we begin, there are a few items that everyone should know. The presentation is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the eMERGE Alliance website a few hours after the webinar concludes. Everyone registered today will receive an email with the website address where you can find both the webinar and presentation slides. To maintain the highest audio quality, all attendees are on mute, and we will be taking questions online using the chat function on your GoToWebinar control panel. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If you'd like to submit a question, please use the GoToWebinar panel and use the question section to post your inquiry. And lastly, invitations to attend the next meeting will be explained following today's Q&A. And with that, here is our first speaker, Paul Savage, Chairman of the eMERGE Alliance and CEO of NextTech Power Systems.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's my pleasure to get to welcome all of the participants in today's webinar and also to thank our co-sponsors that help us get the word out. We have over 450 registered for the webinar, and we're excited to be able to provide this opportunity to share this information. The first sponsor I'd like to recognize is CABA, the Continental Automated Buildings Association, which is an international not-for-profit dedicated to the advancement of intelligent home and intelligent building technologies. CABA's mandate includes providing its members with networking and market research opportunities. CABA also encourages the development of industry standards and protocols and leads cross-industry initiatives. Next, the IEEE, or the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and their Power and Energy Society. Through a joint effort of its 14 societies working on the DC at Home effort, it is involving 500 of its members in more than 50 countries in the idea of DC in the residence. IEEE hopes to have a list of standards that are needed across the societies in late 2015. Also, I'd like to thank the IEEE Smart Village Group, a new IEEE Foundation signature program. Microenergy International, Berlin-based group, believes that access to renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies through microfinance can lead to a world free of energy poverty. The organization is dedicated to mobilizing and supporting financial, technical, and scientific actors to provide households and micro-entrepreneurs at the base of the pyramid with reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy solutions. Now, again. Dedicated research arm of Navigant Consulting, whose team provide industry analysis, end user primary research, and demand assessment, along with a deep examination of technology trends to provide a comprehensive view of these industry sectors. Also, Next Energy, founded in 2002 as a 501c3 nonprofit, is one of the nation's leading accelerators of advanced energy technologies, businesses, and industries. Since its inception, Next Energy has helped attract more than $1.4 billion of new investment to the state of Michigan, including programs in excess of $160 million in which Next Energy has directly participated. Also, FIAS, the U.S. passive building cuts energy consumption by 60 to 80% compared to buildings that are only code compliant. Certified passive buildings provide superior comfort, indoor air quality, and resilience. FIAS is a 501c3 organization that provides research, technical standards, training, certification, and design tools. Their sister organization, FAIS, the Passive House Alliance, is a chapter member organization that provides community and outreach, the handling best practices. And then lastly, TED Magazine, the electrical distributor magazine, provides the entire electrical supply chain with relevant, timely news and information, not just every month in its magazine publication, but also every day online at www.tedmag.com. Their goal is to provide the chain with the tools necessary to stay connected to the entire industry and pass along that information in as many platforms as possible. So I thought it was appropriate to acknowledge the help we've gotten from these interested organizations in the subject matter of today's webinar, and I'd like to thank them all again. Now I'd like to introduce the beginning speaker, Brian Patterson, who was the co-founder of the eMERGE Alliance and now serves as its president. Brian?
Thank you, Paul, and welcome everybody. As you know, the eMERGE Alliance has announced this activity of creating a new standard for residential buildings. But many of you may not know that there are already existing standards that have been created by eMERGE for commercial buildings. eMERGE has undertaken a standard in the area of occupied space in buildings, offices and such. This standard has been issued for quite some time. And a subsection of that, which is still under work, is the task level standard. That's desktop standards for the delivery of power at various levels, including DC power at the desktop. We also have a standard for data and telecom central office space. It's been issued and is now being implemented in many locations. Very close to completion is the campus building microgrid standard. That's in process, and that's under the chair of Guy Ali from Intel. We also are starting to form a charter or group that will cover the exterior building, including EV charging, and as well as building services, generally the backhaul, the HVAC, and so on. These standards efforts are pending in the organization, as well as a standard for retail buildings. Those are all commercial standards. In any case, the residential standard is very specific to residences, of course, homes, and therefore is in many cases different than the commercial standards. It will consider the hybrid use of AC and DC power. As you know, the building stock out there represents a formidable challenge, so we need to define how AC and DC are going to interface together. The committee will be addressing power sources, system connectivity, appliance and device loads, and control options. The standard, like all of our standards, will not cover safety and codes issues, and we'll talk about why in a second. Specific control systems or protocols, as you know, there are many. Performance standards, again, there are many, and listing agency requirements. And the reason for that is simply that the Alliance does not wish to duplicate the effort of other, in most cases, outstanding organizations working in all these areas, but chooses rather to subordinate itself with regard to these topics to those standards and allow the marketplace to decide their relevance and compliance as such. The challenge, as I mentioned, for this group is to really provide a transformational path. It's in many cases the existing homes are, I should say almost in all cases, they're wired for AC, and we're looking to broaden that paradigm out to hybrid AC-DC homes. I think it's the time of the year, but I have a little bit of a throat congestion. Sorry. But it also needs to include new home construction. And that's quite a challenge because there is a difference, as we all know, between those two efforts. It also then will have to look at creating standards on two levels, really. It needs to look at subsystem configurations and not just an all or nothing kind of approach, as well as the whole house power distribution configurations. The subsystem configuration example that could be implemented over time might include power collection and storage as a submodule, low voltage distribution of power, which most of us would consider line voltages, the greater than 60 volts, which typically in a home is either going to be 120, in U.S. homes anyway, will be 120 or 220 volt services, or extremely low voltage, which classes out at less than 60 volts or class 2 power. And then look at specialty areas that may have yet different requirements, electric vehicle charging and other special applications. The scope of the committee activities will take a look first from the point of common connection with a utility. It will then look at the connection and interfaces with devices at the other end, all your appliances and loads, as well as looking at distributed power generation, storage, and electric vehicle connectivity. And all of those have very specific requirements that need to be addressed. As I mentioned before, the standard will be subordinate to authorities having jurisdiction. That includes building codes and equipment standards, safety standards, and such. The committee, however, will be in a position to make recommendations to revise, add new language or new codes and standards as appropriate. And for example, this year to the code-making body, NFPA and the National Electrical Code effort, we participated in a group along with UL and others who made recommendations, specific recommendations in the area of microgrids, including DC microgrids, and that is building level microgrids inside the common point of common connection, as well as energy storage systems and other relevant areas that a hybrid home would need to address. So that activity is already underway, as well as our liaison with many, many different trade associations to make sure that we include use cases in the thinking of everybody involved. The committee chairman that we selected is Dave Macarone. You're going to hear from him in a second. He's from Thomas & Betts, who you know probably as a company that supplies the product today for many of the residential requirements. And they, not too long ago, became a part of the ABB group. And we're going to welcome Dave in a second. The ABB and Thomas & Betts is a participating member of the eMERGE Alliance, and as such is eligible to chair committees like this. The committee membership will include, from eMERGE membership, governing, participating, and corresponding and liaison interests, but we're also inviting ad hoc subject matter experts who may not be eMERGE members, and you'll hear more about that and how to apply for such a position and participation on this committee. The committee meetings will take place typically once per month, sometimes more frequently, and occasionally they get canceled due to holidays and other requirements and trade shows and things. But all the meetings are held by electronic means, so it's really easy to attend and be a part of it. Typically, they're going to either be web-based or telephone-based, and everybody will have an opportunity to participate in that way. The committee will follow generally the ANSI guidelines, which are embedded into the eMERGE bylaws, and all of our standards follow those guidelines. The committee charter is to try to have a preliminary standard within 1 year. That means sometime by the end of 2015. I think you heard Paul mention that this coincides with IEEE's effort to utilize some of that work. And the committee liaison includes, the official committee liaisons include already the IEEE with the DC at Home effort and the Next Energy Center Next Home, as well as the Passive House. And you heard that there, some of those folks are sponsors of today's seminar. Others, though, will be invited, particularly those who have an interest in hybrid AC-DC residential or even small commercial buildings where we can borrow some experience in those areas. Registered committee members who are already signed up include eMERGE members listed here. I won't read through them all, but you can see that the committee starts out with a healthy foundation of participation from some large and small companies. The committee's charter date of the first official meeting will be the 30th of January, and you're going to hear more about that date in a few minutes from both Dave and Jennifer because you have an opportunity to participate. The second meeting will be open not only to eMERGE members but also to prospective members, people who are thinking about joining eMERGE, as well as I mentioned, ad hoc subject area expert candidates. In order to do that, and we'll repeat this so you don't have to write it down the first time, but you might want to grab a pen for later, by just sending an email to Jennifer Bonner, jbonner@inventures.com, and Jennifer is today's webinar director as well as our program manager, so she wears lots of hats for us. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the chairman of the Hybrid House effort and his effort to reinvent residential power, and that's Dave Macarone, a residential standards chairman, who happens to be the market development manager for residential at Thomas & Betts, as I mentioned before. Dave?
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for joining today's webinar. I wanted to start out today by saying the webinar today is intended to be a high-level view of the opportunity and not to provide the details. That will be the function of the committee and the subcommittees. So what is the hybrid house? Well, basically speaking, the hybrid house is a home built with both AC and DC power availability. The DC circuits will be used to power lighting, such as LEDs, communication equipment, and other DC devices, including some advanced appliances, as well as things like surface mount or flat mount televisions, which require very little power. AC power won't be going away. It'll still be used to power existing traditional AC devices and appliances within the home. So your Christmas lights today may be operating on AC, the LED lights, but who knows in the future, that might be direct. To accomplish this, a single highly energy efficient rectifier will be used to convert the power from AC to DC when on-site production of DC is insufficient to carry all of the DC loads. Site-based power generation, such as solar and wind, can be used to provide DC power directly to the loads and or the power storage systems. Excess power may be redirected and sold back to the utility company, possibly offsetting some of the AC power that's being purchased. The system can be designed to operate as its own microgrid in the event of a power interruption, basically creating a virtual backup generator. So let's now take a look at how the hybrid house may work. If you take a look at a basic home, the way it's developed today, the way that we all have our houses wired today, we have power coming in off the grid, going to an AC panel, and then directly into the home, and then distributed throughout the home. The hybrid house would then operate a little differently. Coming off of the power panel, power would then be redirected or directed to an AC/DC power management unit. Now, this could be the highly effective inverter. From the management unit, it would then go to a DC power distribution panel. This would not be the same as a regular AC distribution panel, as DC power requires its own type of circuit breakers. So there will be a distinction there, and there would be things to address, such as compatibility as well. In addition, an optional battery backup or battery storage system could be added. And also off-site power, such as, or on-site power, such as solar or wind, would be added. Now at this point, when you take a look at it, in the event of a power failure perhaps, what you have here is a totally independent system within the home. You could remove the AC panel or the AC power from the dwelling at this time, and you would have power, lights, communications, television, enough to be able to keep, let's say, half of the house or more operating off-grid. So the question becomes, why the hybrid house? Well, most electrical loads, when you look at televisions today, cell phones, computers, tablets, light sources like LEDs, even home appliances, natively operate on DC power. Your furnace, for example, my furnace at home, I have a highly efficient furnace at home that basically all operates on DC. The controls are DC, the motors, the fan motor is DC. The only thing that runs off of AC is the conversion to DC. So there's actually a lot in our homes today that are operating on DC. The use of local DC electricity in place of AC electricity also eliminates unnecessary conversions from DC to AC and vice versa. In addition, the use of DC electricity in many cases will allow better control in the development and use of DC applications. Currently, LED fixtures installed in the home require an AC to DC converter. A lot of people aren't aware of this. Having DC available as a power source in the home would easily allow the installation of LED lighting and would also become much more flexible. DC power eliminates the need for AC power inversion on external power generating sources, thus making the adding of solar panels, for example, much easier to install. It also helps reduce the overall cost of a solar or a wind installation. So when we look at it, whether the power interruptions are man-made or weather-caused, such as hurricanes, in the case of Hurricane Sandy and Katrina, for example, DC power systems are much more reliable than the public grid system. So, what kind of standards are required? Well, we talked about power sources, or we'll talk about power sources. We have on-site power generation and harvesting, on-site electrical storage and charge control, power converters, inverters, and conditioners, power management and reporting, including demand response, net metering, peak shaving, etc. And this is one of the most important ones right now, and that's the voltage. Currently, there are many options for the low power side of it. Some of them are being used in DC applications today. But the real question becomes, is 12 volts, 24, 48 volts on the low side, possibly 190, 240, 380 volts for appliances. It's critical that we help to make a determination on the voltages there, because we have the opportunity to create a global standard, something that, as we all know, in the AC power side of the business, there really isn't a global standard, but we do have that opportunity here. We're also looking at ampacity and tolerances and system configurations. When we look at system connectivity, we run into the issues of Class 1 and Class 2 circuits, as Brian mentioned earlier. Breakers and distribution panels, they differ from AC. And obviously, we would want it to differ from the AC so that there is no potential problems that would occur there. Wiring type and gauges. The type of wiring that we have run through the house today may or may not work for DC. We may be able to find lower cost alternatives. Again, another big area is going to be wiring devices, switches and receptacles. If we look at it from a global standpoint, we do have the opportunity here to start defining what DC power, DC current could look like globally and create those standards. Grounding and bonding, that has different issues with DC power as well. GFCI and ground fault protection. Do we even need this for DC power? DC power is very safe, so this might eliminate perhaps the requirement for such. And global plug standards. As I mentioned, we have the opportunity now to create one global plug standard. So regardless of whether you're in the United States or in Europe, We may have the opportunity here to define what that is and should be going forward. We've gotten, there are several other countries that have approached us once they've heard about our approach here, and so there's definitely been global interest. So if we look at appliances and device loads, we have extremely low voltage currents, such as in personal electronics, home electronics, including security, the Internet of Things, as Brian likes to call it. We have mid-range. That would be countertop appliances, perhaps. And then we have major appliances. This could be your washer and dryer, for example. As I mentioned, there are many appliances today that operate on DC voltage, and we're really not aware of it. DC motors are much more efficient, and the manufacturers have a lot more ability to make many features using DC as opposed to the AC. Solid-state lighting. I see this as being a very big part of the hybrid home. As LEDs, for example, are becoming more and more mainstream, and a new group of lighting is right behind it called OLEDs. HVAC, including radiant heat. As I mentioned, my furnace, my heating system in my home today all operates on DC. The motors are DC, the controls are DC. The only thing that's AC is the conversion. And electric vehicles and fast charging. So the next steps, next actions. We are going to have a committee meeting on January 30th of 2015. That's going to be the official first meeting. What we hope to do at that point would be to confirm the charter of the group. We are going to affirm member participation and resources. And the meeting is open to current eMERGE members, organizations pursuing eMERGE membership, and subject matter experts. This will be an input session, this first meeting. I want everyone to understand that. We will be looking for everyone's input. Committee meeting schedule, as Brian mentioned, we're going to be meeting once a month or more often if required. And the meetings are conducted electronically. So that pretty much concludes my portion of the webinar here. Again, I tried to keep things at a higher level so that we can discuss in more detail the upcoming meetings. Now I would like to turn the webinar back over to Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, as well as Brian and Paul. I hope everyone found that to be informative and a good way to start us off. Next, we will begin the Q&A session. As a reminder, following the Q&A, we're going to discuss how you can join the standards development activities in that January 30th meeting that Dave mentioned. So for our first question, this has come up, I've seen a few times in the Q&A. Will a copy of the webinar be available? And I can address that yes. As a registered attendee, you will automatically receive a copy of today's presentation. That'll be emailed to you shortly after the webinar concludes. And for the next question, where can listeners find the in-process standards in terms of the campus building microgrid or the desktop that were mentioned? Brian, do you want to take that question?
Yes, the standards that are in work are maintained as confidential to the committees that are working on them because there are obviously many changes and many different considerations that go on in the process of standards making. So the way you can get access to them, of course, is to become a part of their effort. And as we said today, the easiest way to do that is to apply for a membership of eMERGE at the appropriate level. And if you go to the eMERGE website, as Jennifer suggested, you can see the various levels and ways to join and then participate. Once you are a member, of course, then you have access to all of the documents at the appropriate level. that are both finished and in work, as well as other information. Because we also conduct rather extensive education and promotional activities throughout the year to let people know not only of what's going on and what we're trying to do, but also of some of the opportunity and results that people have achieved with some of the configurations that have been enabled by the use of the standards. Back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. The next question, how will the eMERGE Alliance standards, the residential standard, align with ASHRAE and IEEE standards?
Again, I would say that particularly for ASHRAE, which is more performance-oriented, although there are areas that will obviously, the eMERGE standard will need to be subordinate to them. And in the performance area, people either by code or by election have the opportunity to meet those standards or not in some cases. We certainly encourage people to meet the higher standard. So one of the things that the committee does in all these cases, performance and otherwise, is we take a look at other standards that might impact the DC standard or the hybrid DC, AC-DC standards, and try to make sure that we configure things and do things in a way that people have the best opportunity to meet those standards. In many cases, we found that our standards allow people to more easily meet existing standards in other areas. And I hope that answers the question even more generally than just ASHRAE and IEEE.
Okay, thanks, Brian. There are a couple technical questions that came in early on in the presentation. I'll just repeat a couple of those, and Dave, maybe you might address how those will be addressed during the subsequent calls of the committee. Have you considered a community DC grid in parallel with the AC grid, allowing for community energy storage systems, for example? And then another question on the DC power panel, would each circuit be controlled by Class 2 standards?
Two very good questions. Actually, as part of the eMERGE Alliance, I know that there have been many discussions about a grid going beyond the residents, if you will, and then that could be potentially a small community. I know Brian has actually gotten some requests from other countries. There are many countries like India where power is non-existent, and the possibility of a DC microgrid, could certainly be a possibility. At this point, it is not the intention for this committee to go beyond the home. That might be perhaps a next step or another committee that comes in down the line to a community level, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility here. Now, on the panel itself, the control panel itself, that does fall, some of it falls under the current Class 2, because that's where a lot of it currently resides today. Many companies, ABB, for example, is one of them, actually does make low voltage DC circuit breakers, so that there is some existing product and technology out there today to cover this.
Great.
I was going to just add to that, Jennifer and Dave. The subject of what kind of power comes into the residence, I mean, the ideal situation is if you have the most options. So the ideal situation is whether it's from a community grid or whether it's a local utility who decides to offer both AC and DC options, particularly in the face of fast charging and other things. We think that a lot of utilities are looking at that. So the ideal situation would be if you have both AC and DC available, both outside as well as inside the common point of connection with the utility.
Thanks, Brian. Next question I'll direct to Paul. Are there currently any demonstration projects for the hybrid house? And if yes, what voltages do they use?
Thanks for that, Jen. Just before I answer that, I did want to let people know that free public overviews of the existing standards are available on the website. It's the in-process standards that are in committee and don't have an overview available, but if people are interested in what the occupied space and data and telecom standards are in the broad strokes, they are available on the website under the standards tab. For demonstration projects, there is one here in Detroit where I am today at the Next Energy Center. There's a DC house that was built by Champion Homes, the largest modular home builder in the United States, and outfitted to handle both AC and DC devices. Many of the founding members of the Residential Standards Committee at eMERGE have provided products, including my company, Next Tech Power Systems, also Osram Slovenia, Emerson Network Power, Step Warm Floor, and Bosch. Bosch appliances are being retrofit to have an all-DC suite that will be first available for view in that house. And I should say in other places, in Thailand, I believe we have some friends from Thailand on the phone with us. The World Green City has a number of small business and residential homes that are AC and DC, and we're seeing more and more of this in countries that are challenged in providing energy access. We're finding that these DC power systems come to the fore first. So something that's exciting for me to see grow out of this activity here in the U.S. is the possibility of really creating the kind of interoperability and parts commonality across the world for DC power systems, generally lower in power capacity than are usually thought, but that is possible because of these other innovations in the single-family home, like what the Passive House Institute is doing. So there's one here in Detroit, but there are many more coming.
Great. Thank you, Paul. The next question is, how much storage is needed to operate off-grid? For example, to keep refrigeration or HVAC for a certain number of hours or days. Is there one of our speakers that can answer that question?
Well, I'll start out by saying that it all depends on the size of the house and what you have in it. But generally speaking, there's really two approaches. One, which is you're just looking for some ride-through capability for storage, which would generally be applicable in short interruptions and situations where you might have unstable power from the utility, or that you're using it for short periods of demand response and other utility benefiting kinds of situations. The other one is where somebody wants to go off for long periods of time or in a critical mission kind of situation. And we actually have a story of, and Paul, you may be the better teller of this, but for example, if you're a person who's handicapped and rely on electronic devices and power-assisted devices, you may need critical power all the time at a certain level. And then the sizing of that would be done appropriately so that all of your on-site capability, whether it's solar or micro generation, fuel cells, what have you, are capable of sustaining you for forever, essentially, or for long periods of time in those critical applications. So it's a tough question to answer. It's a multidimensional question, but one that the committee will wrestle with right up front when it develops the use cases that it will try to tackle. And I don't think that the standard will be a one-size-fits-all. The standard will have options in it, if it's a good one, which allows the scaling of the different options for different applications within the residential domain.
Brian, I would like to make a comment on that as well. You're absolutely correct about, it all depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. but there is, I think it's KB Homes right now, who is one of the largest manufacturers of homes right now. They're experimenting in California and I believe in Arizona with battery storage in those areas with solar panels. But even at best right now, what they hope to be able to achieve with basically a house and a backyard full of solar panels is to be able to generate enough power so that the home could be off-grid or operating on the battery for the remainder of the evening and then start over again the next day. The advantage with a DC powered system and certainly a hybrid would be we're really talking about pioneering new uses for the DC power, such as all LED lighting and power lighting and communications is how we see the ability of taking the hybrid house. And in those situations, with a battery backup, first of all, your solar panel requirements are much smaller than if you were trying to power the whole house by converting back to AC. The battery storage is significantly smaller, depending on what you're planning to do. But really, as we talked about, in the event of a major power failure, eventually the sun will come out if it was caused by a hurricane or a storm. And theoretically, you could keep the house lit and power your phones and computers and televisions almost indefinitely.
All right, great, thank you. One of the other questions that we have is geared toward kind of the logistics of the ongoing teleconferences that this group will have and how international participation in time zones would be considered for the committee meetings. I think I could answer that by saying, it will depend on the makeup of the group of participants. We try to be very accommodating to the participants, the members that are involved. So we have lots of experience with setting meetings for global participants that accommodate everyone. You can either have a rolling or alternating meeting, but we'll definitely want to accommodate folks and look forward to hearing from folks that are going to be participating, where you're from, and gathering that data.
And I should also mention, Jennifer, that the eMERGE Alliance itself is looking to establish regional chapters of this effort around the world to make it more convenient for our international participants to participate in the effort. And in many cases, we expect that those regional efforts will be semi-autonomous and that we'll just need to coordinate for the purposes of global harmonization. But we expect that there are enough regional differences in both the challenge and the requirements and the existing infrastructure that there may be differences in the way the standard might be written and deployed. So that's something that if you're interested in being a part of a regional chapter in this effort, please also send us a note. You can send it to Jennifer as well, and she'll pass it on to Paul and myself and Dave. But let us know if you're interested in helping establish those regional chapters.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Next question, have you approached manufacturers about potentially providing DC alternative products in the future? Throw that out to the group.
Actually, many of them have approached us, and it's interesting because while we're probably a little bit further ahead in the commercial building area, which is dominated for the most part, or has been by the lighting activity and the IT and communications equipment applications. In the residential area, actually many of the large appliance folks have apparently been thinking about this on their own and are actually very willing to participate in an effort. It's a bit of the chicken and egg problem, and if you're a large appliance manufacturer or even an innovative young small device manufacturer, you're a bit concerned as to whether the DC infrastructure will be there if you develop these DC appliances. So it's a hand in glove or a chicken and egg kind of thing, and so we're expecting and inviting these manufacturers to actually directly participate in the standards so that the process can operate in parallel. And as you heard, I think, from Paul, one of the majors, Bosch, has already initiated their effort, and we've heard from several others that they have similar efforts that just are not announced at this point.
In addition, Brian, we've also heard by a number of LED lighting manufacturers who look at this as an opportunity to simplify and their product, as well as being able to aesthetically release themselves from being kind of corralled into defining what a light fixture should be. And so there's a lot of creative things going on out there, and certainly DC is an area that a lot of them are looking at in LED lighting.
Thank you. Next question comes from a name familiar from one of our eMERGE Alliance members. Will the committee be coordinating closely with the NEC task group who just proposed new articles for the 2017 National Electric Code addressing DC and AC microgrids for energy storage?
Yeah, that's an easy one, and Dave and I have already talked about it, the effort that's already underway on the commercial side to work with, in particular, NFPA, who in the U.S. Regulates the U.S. standard, as well as through UL working with some of our friends to the north and south on this continent. But we're also looking for similar efforts to be conducted, as I mentioned before, in the various other regions of the world. So it is our intention at all times to coordinate our efforts with the existing codes and regulatory authorities having jurisdiction in these various areas, whether it's in the U.S. and North America in general or around the world. So that's a given, that if you work with eMERGE, you know you have to coordinate with all of the rest of the standards bodies, or at least the ones that are recognized as being important to coordinate with. We do have formal liaison, by the way, with many of those organizations, typically at the top of the organization, with a shared mission of wanting to harmonize and globalize these standards.
Thanks, Brian. Paul, I'd like to address the next question to you. Some folks are asking, where would be the best place for folks to find the products that would be available in this space?
Well, that's an easy question. The eMERGE members that manufacture products that conform to the existing standards are found on the eMERGE Alliance website under the registered products tab. There are many, many more in the pipeline than there are shown on the page, but you can see what's currently available. If you look at the kinds of companies that are in the membership and joining the membership, you'll appreciate that there's more coming in the hardware, HVAC, consumer electronics space, which is not yet shown on the registration page. Jen, I also would like to take the opportunity to address or further address the question about international participation. We recognize the importance of having global standards and the input that's required to make them work. And I think all of the U.S. participants in these committees are fully willing to share the burden of lousy timing. And I say that in part knowing that there are friends in Thailand up in the middle of the night just to participate in this call. And so we want to make sure that people know that this is not a U.S. time zone centric project, and that we won't approach it that way.
Great, thank you, Paul. Next question. Looks like we have a few more minutes to address a few more questions. I might not get to everyone, but there are definitely great questions rolling in, and we appreciate the dialogue that those are helping to generate. So the next question: will the standard apply to residential photovoltaic system design?
We are. This is Dave. we really didn't have the intentions of defining or changing photovoltaic design. PV panels output DC power now, so it would just be a question of the controls or the configuration to work with the DC home. There are many designs out there, and there are a lot of standards that exist today in photovoltaic panels. Again, it's not our intention to change that, but to utilize alternate power sources like photovoltaic as part of the hybrid house.
And specifically, there are many organizations, and I think the solar industry has its own set of trade organizations that attempt to standardize design and other elements of that. So what we're most concerned with is the connectivity of those elements into a system, and which generally really only deals with the outputs of a piece of equipment. We don't try to tell people how to do things. We tell people how they might be useful in a system by trying to provide interface standards and parametric standards for the voltages and other tolerances involved.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Yeah, if I may, on the existing operating voltages, I think I didn't fully answer when you asked me before. People can go to the Next Energy website. If you Google Next Energy, Next Home, you'll get to the Next Energy website. You'll be able to see what's in that building, and there you'll find that both the 380-volt standard, which was the fruit of the Data and Telecom Committee, and the 24-volt standard are present in that DC house project. So 380 and 24 were easily borrowed from the work of those committees, which really gets around to why this Residential Standards Committee has been formed, is to make sure that there aren't elements in that use case that need to be further considered, as Dave was saying, grounding and so on. But I wanted folks to know that 380 and 24 volts DC are the two operating voltages in the DC house here.
Thank you, Paul. All right, we have, I think, time for just a couple more questions. And I'll throw this out to the group. At higher voltages, DC arcing at switching, breaking, and connecting is an issue. Are there plans and techniques to mitigate this?
I'd like to start out by just saying that by virtue of the fact that DC is being heavily investigated and product is being developed for the data world, which wants to operate pretty much with uninterrupted power, meaning that they want to do hot swapping and things like that. Excuse me. That there has been developed both interconnection as well as breakers and other power protection equipment that is now suitable for DC. And so there's a lot of technology that will immediately be able to be borrowed from those other applications. And as you probably know, in the low voltage area, our telephone system has been operating at low voltage for not quite a century, but close to it. And applications in other areas have really helped progress the power protection, power management, and all of those devices coming along. Some of them by virtue of, in the case of Class 2 circuits, limiting voltages and current, but in the case of high voltages, by using solid-state technology and other physical protection technology that is combined to make things much more practical than ever before.
Great, and then I think this will be the last question. What kind of efforts are being done to get the general public involved and interested? And the second part of that question, how is a consumer able to adopt the hybrid technology?
The main way that we're doing that is through our educational and marketing programs to make people aware of things. Of course, we're not the only voice in the chorus, and we expect as time goes on, as OEMs and interested people who are supplying the systems and are facilitating these kinds of hybrid switchovers will join in that effort. But again, combining with other trade organizations, and you see the sponsors that joined us in this webinar, those are the kind of organizations that will help get the message out, communicate, and ultimately allow for this kind of a transformation. But for the most part, we're at the beginning. Generally, starting out with standards is the most appropriate after a reasonable period of experimentation, and I think we've seen probably over the last 5 years or so people experimenting with various aspects of DC, both in terms of its capability, its safety, its usability, and so on. So the effort will switch as people start to undertake actual implementation over to an educational need as well. And TED Magazine joined us today. We hope that others in the media join us to promote the use of this technology, if you will, although it's not quite really new technology in most cases. But we are kind of in that Prius stage. It's like the first hybrid cars. Not everybody knew what they were and how they worked and so on and so forth. And now a Prius is a pretty common sight on the road.
Yeah, and Brian, I guess that you really did sum it up pretty well. We really are on the ground floor of this new technology. Not necessarily a new technology, but certainly a more defined use of the technology. It was kind of in a situation where we were waiting for technology of the products to catch up with it. And if you look at the advancements that are being made now with the low power consumption of lighting, appliances, and everything else, the time really is now for this. So you're right. I mean, we have to develop the standards. We have to get more and more manufacturers involved with it before we actually go and make the whole concept totally public and totally commercial. I think we have a great advantage at this point. We're on the forefront of a new frontier. I would like to think this could definitely be a game changer when we're looking at residential construction. I've been in the business for a long time, and this is probably one of the newest, most exciting things I've seen that could potentially come out of the wiring or the power of a home. I mean, we literally may have the ability to take half of a home or more totally off the grid. So it's an exciting time right now to be involved in it, but we really are on the forefront of it.
Thank you, Dave. This concludes our Q&A session. And Brian, if you bring up the next slide, we'll talk about our final points before we end the webinar and want to be respectful of everyone's time. For additional information concerning the eMERGE Alliance or to become a member, use the URL listed at www.emergealliance.org. And to receive an invitation to the January 30th meeting of the Residential Standards Committee that we've been talking about today, existing members should go to the members-only area of the eMERGE Alliance website, sign in, and click to subscribe to the Residential Committee. If you're not already a member of the Alliance, there are a couple of ways you can participate in the next meeting. Send an email to jbonner@inventures.com and indicate whether you are a prospective eMERGE member or an ad hoc expert. For prospective members, simply indicate that you are pursuing membership via your organization in the body of the email. And for ad hoc expert candidates, simply include your professional resume credentials and why you are seeking participation on the committee. We hope to see you all again in January, and thank you for attending today's webinar. We appreciate your attendance, and you will automatically receive a link to the presentation slides and webinar recording shortly after we conclude.
Jennifer, if I can just make one final note that many of us, I know Dave and myself and others, will be available at the International Builders Show, which is in Vegas between January 20th and 22nd, or at least the trade show portion. and will be available at the TNB booth, the ABB-sponsored Thomas & Betts booth, which is number C8522 if you want to look it up on the website there. But we'll be available to answer more questions. You get to meet Dave and discuss your interest and your situation, what you might want to do relative to this effort.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for your interest and participating in today's webinar. Your Q&A provided an engaging conversation. We appreciate it. So thank you for your interest in eMERGE Alliance, and have a great day.